Hey everyone, Chris here, and I hope you like this episode that features Will Roberts, CEO of ioCurrents. In today's podcast, we're going to talk to Will about his first year as CEO, some of the challenges we face as an industry, specifically around technology adoption, and why this is a great space to be in. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what we have coming up. February will be a full month. We have some great guests that will be chatting about seafarers' well-being, a bit about what it's like to be a maritime attorney, and get an update on what's happening in the Red Sea. Of course, all this is easy to keep track of by following the podcast. If you are enjoying the podcast, leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps us reach a wider audience. Thanks again, and we hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur. And I'm your host, Chris Aversano. On today's podcast, we have Will Roberts, CEO of ioCurrents. Digitization gives you the data. ioCurrents Marine Insight platform tells you the story. Through purposeful digitization, ioCurrents tells your team when, where, and why to pay attention to each asset on each unique vessel, offering the opportunity to gain efficiencies across fuel, maintenance, and voyages. And today we're going to discuss that and a whole bunch of other things with Will. Will, welcome to the podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy New Year, and here's to a healthy and prosperous 2024. So let's start off a little bit for our audience. What's going on and what's the latest at ioCurrents and kind of what you guys are trying to focus on here.
Yeah, we'll jump into that. First, I want to say it's a big fan of the podcast and been very impressed with the last handful of guests. Learned a lot. I think I just listened to the one recently from Ali. He had that quote. What was it? Garbage in, danger out. I think you said that was going to be your quote of the year, and I love that one, especially as we get into more of the digital and analytics that are happening in today's day and age. Joined ioCurrents about a year ago, a highly skilled team that is looking to accelerate adoption of our product by vessel owners and move deeper into the customers' businesses, going through digital and analytics. It's been 1 year since I joined and been a heck of a year. We've doubled our installed base and we're staring down the pipe of doubling that installed base again this year. So we've had great success in getting the message out. I would tell you that the timing is great right now. 2023 was huge for machine learning and artificial intelligence products that we already have and are being accepted. So our customers are seeing immediate payback from our solutions, and we keep offering more and more as they ask for more and more. So ioCurrents, we're a startup, but we've been continually evolving. The idea behind ioCurrents and our founders, especially Cosmo King, which many people know, have always been to help our customers reduce their impact on the environment. In operational vessels, crews are working at reducing fuel usage and extending equipment life, and this has direct correlation to reducing costs. So it's a big win-win between ourselves and our customers. I would say that our key focus involves creating simple solutions for our customers to get the easy wins for themselves and their businesses. Big data is scary, and honestly, it's not useful to the operators. So we distill that data into useful information. Once our customers have control of their vessel and equipment data and information, the sky's the limit in terms of how and where we can support them. The longer we are on board the vessels, the more we help optimize their operations. This might be a good time to mention that we use AI and machine learning to go beyond just the basic reporting. So our systems have capabilities to predict issues before they even happen. So on top of getting control of day-to-day operations, we're also looking well into the future for our customers and their vessels.
So what you guys are doing is kind of basically taking preventive maintenance and really adding on a whole other layer to that is kind of what I understand you guys are doing. Is that the general 1,000-foot view of the product and what you're doing? But then obviously incorporating some of the technology to make things, as you said, a little bit better and safer.
That's a great way of looking at it. I think when the company was originally founded, it was looking at that predictive, extending maintenance, but also predicting failures. But what you see is when you have that same exact data set that you need for that is also very good at optimizing, fuel operations of the vessel. Also, that data set helps with just normal operational profiles, i.e. fuel and emissions reports, engine hours, just very basic things that come out of our system just as it's just a standard thing that we do. But you take that and now you can spin it in those multiple different directions: predictive analysis, failure analysis, vessel profiling, looking at just improving operations across the board. So what we find is we put our system on board with a few basic scenarios or a few basic questions that the customer wants answered. And then we continually come back and ask the next question. Well, what else bothers you? What else concerns you? What else is having an issue with your vessels? Most times something we have can help them in analyzing it or bettering their standard operating procedures.
And that's really interesting because one of the things that we talk about a lot about on this podcast, and it's an overarching theme, I think it's change, right? And when you're dealing with, especially the maritime space, obviously the tongue-in-cheek name of this podcast is The Last Dinosaur. It's because we're resistant to change, although maybe there's an asteroid out there. I hope it doesn't wipe out the maritime space, but maybe it wipes out that mentality. I don't think it's an asteroid. I think it's a slow drip, in my opinion. But you have to go into a company and tell the operators, technical managers, both of the groups, to tell them, or at least advise them, that there may be a better way to do things. Talk a little bit about the challenges when you propose these ideas to people, when you come into a new company, something along that nature.
Great direction of travel there, Chris. Yes, maritime industry, last dinosaur, we're averse to change. I started my career in the United States Navy. I drove nuclear submarines. There is a submarine in Pearl Harbor that is a museum, 70-year-old submarine. And when we went on board it, when I was on board my submarine, we noticed a lot of the same gear. So, 50 years later, and there's a lot of the same gauges, a lot of the same operational pieces of equipment. So that's just in a nutshell. Maritime is averse to big changes. And for good reason. When a ship goes to sea, it needs to get to the next port. And it's understandable that people don't want to change anything that could increase risk. If they know what works, they're happy with that. So what do is we try to make a very simple product. It doesn't have a lot of interference with ship operations or any of the equipment. Our hardware is small, our software is small, and we're not engaging on a minute by minute basis with the crew. We're offering very simple, straightforward, binary things to look at: a new speed, a different way of looking at a route, a different way of operating a piece of equipment. We're only doing that in small bits to not overwhelm. I think that's getting out there. I think that's appreciated by and people are seeing the savings. In my previous role, I actually bought ioCurrents products for vessels. So I know what the change management was required when I did it. We've tried to make it even better than when I was having it as a customer and making it easy. But at least I get to talk with a little bit of truthiness to our customers now and say, I've seen it. I know how it operates. I would recommend you do this, this, and this to get the most immediate value with the least distraction and the least amount of change management.
So you bring a parallel point, because we talk a lot about like the shoreside folks, the technical superintendent, maybe the head of operations, and some of the day-to-day folks, perhaps an IT person who would be running it or implementing the platform. Talk about a little bit about the sailors side of it. And you kind of bring up that the impact there is minimal. And I think that that's one of the things, another reoccurring theme. And I've had a few people, Dr. Jason Zeidema, Raul Harris, and they talk about the burden of technology falls quietly but heavily on the seafarers a lot of time. Talk about how you guys have to manage that. And it's interesting that you were a client of IO initially, so you kind of have a little bit of appreciation. Talk about how that's managed and how you see that not only with your product, but with just digitization in general.
So digitalization, analytics, the future, it's scary to the onboard crew. I think it's a known right now that crew sizes are not increasing, but the technology that's on board a vessel is increasing. You need to have an electrical engineering or electronics degree in order to understand how to operate a piece of kit that's 100 years old, i.e. a diesel engine's we've had diesels for however long, but nowadays you can't do much maintenance on them. You have to understand how to plug into the computer system to see what's going on. And that's a big change. On top of that, we're just asking our crews to do a whole lot more when they're out at sea. So again, one of our key strategies at ioCurrents is not to add to that. Ours is to help. And everybody says we're here to help, but really we are. Our system is not blasting back commentary or alerts to the operating crew all the time. The crews have an operational vessel that has its own alarm and monitoring panels, and they're operating the boat. So go ahead and operate the boat. They may not have time to be analyzing months of data about what's happening with their lubrication system or their generators. Our system does that 24/7. So we can take that and come back and talk to shoreside and talk to the mariners and say, we see this. on a not to interfere basis with everything else you're doing. Why don't you go look at this system? Because we think there's an anomaly there that you can't see with your naked eye. Now, God forbid something bad happens to a good ship, and something's happening to, per se, a generator or a main engine. When we do see that, we are able to provide a platform that provides transparency to shoreside and mariners at the same time. So, hey, everybody take a pause. Now you can all go to the same exact screen and look at the same exact sensors right now and start diagnosing. And from personal experience, again, as a client, I saw, with my team, we were able to get 3 or 4 people onto a call looking at the same data, and we were able to diagnose it within minutes. It's amazing how much that transparency helps with the diagnosis. So, hey, when this happened, seawater temperature went here, pressure went there. I think we should look there. You're talking about incredibly intelligent people, and now you're giving them very usable data, real time.
That's one of the other themes that I've heard continually on this podcast, and that is, you know, AI and MI seems scary, seems like you're going to put us out of a job. But what it allows in a lot of cases for people to do is it allows them to do that part of the job, the analyzing, the troubleshooting, a lot quicker and take a lot of the guesswork out and allow the people who use it to make more of the critical decisions, not to try to go get the data, which takes half of the day, and then analyzing it takes 20 seconds, right? In your case, and I'm not minimizing it, but that's what it is. One of the interesting things that a guest said to me, Scott Bergeron of Ollendorf, he said on the podcast, the maritime industry does adapt, but it does take a lot of proving ground. You have to prove that the product can adapt because of the conditions that it lies in, particularly saltwater, a lot of vibration. Talk a little bit about how you guys have to overcome that as well, because that's you're actually putting sensors on ships and you're having that interface.
Maritime is a proving ground. It's difficult. It's to your point, it's salt air, salt water, big seas, bad communications. It's not a fun place to work. And I'm not a theme that I've seen in the technology space is people taking land-based, steady state data analytics, machine learning, bunches and bunches of other technology and trying to marinate them. And that really doesn't work sometimes. I mean, it's really difficult to take a land-based factory type product and make it to work on an unstable, moving, not when I say unstable, I mean something that's it's transitory. It's moving around the world in different environments and make it work. So ioCurrents, founders based out of Seattle, Washington, had a maritime background, and our proving ground was the Bering Sea. The initial times when we put out the ioCurrents product in the early days were on tugboats and fishing boats operating in one of the toughest areas in the world in maritime. Now, I know every time I say that, I'll get somebody that says the North Sea is tougher, the North Atlantic. They're all bad. I mean, they're all tough places to operate. So I give due deference to all of them. But the Bering Sea is still pretty tough. So in order for our equipment to have operated successfully up there for many years, in that environment and communicating back to shore base in those crazy environments is a testament to the fact that it works. And since then, going to the other tough places in the world, every ocean, including the North Sea, including points far off the coast of Africa, our product works. So just testament to working off Alaska gives us that street cred, gives us that tattoo that says we know what we're doing.
Yeah, I got a funny story about that. Years ago, well, many, many years ago, when I was sailing, I was working for Mobil Oil, and it was Jones Act in the Gulf of Mexico, and I had a job offer from a company, and it was to go on their Alaska run, and it was around this time of year. And I talked to a friend of mine. He goes, "Wait a minute." He goes, "You want to make less money, go work in Alaska in the winter? Wait a minute, aren't you working in the Gulf of Mexico?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "It's a lot nicer there." And it was a mentor of mine, and I stayed with Mobil Oil for the period. But it just goes to show what you're saying. Yeah, he was like, "Yeah, I would just avoid Alaska in the middle of winter if you could do that," and I did. So I could appreciate that for sure. Moving on, I'm gonna change the focus just a little bit here. You said kind of in the startup phase, although if I'm not mistaken, you guys have been around for 4 or 5 years, maybe a little longer
Yes.
than that. So still startup ish, and having to look at the landscape of financing and everything else. And given the last 18 months now, almost 2 years, where money has tightened a little bit, I still think that the maritime space is probably one of the more interesting investment theses that whether it's VC or PE can invest in. How has that kind of changed for what you guys are doing and how you guys are trying to scale? From 2022 to 23, you said you've doubled and you want to double that again. And that's significant increase in scaling. Given that you have some hardware, given that you have some software and want to improve the scope, how do you guys kind of view that going forward?
Well, I think we're blessed. We're lucky. I mean, we worked hard to get to the place where we're at, where our investors understand our product and our market strategy, and they're behind us through this. So, over that last 18 months, thankfully, we haven't had to be a part of it. We've been able to focus on what we're doing and where we want to grow. Vice, are we going to survive? So it's been very healthy there. And again, I think it's great that we have our ownership or our technologists that understand what we're trying to do, but also have learned about the difficulties in maritime and how to support in that growth around maritime. So that's been great. I'll tell you, when things tighten up, the people who are still around with the key products, I would be remiss in saying, thank goodness we had a product that works when this tightening started. It wasn't like we had to go prove ourselves. It was, we have a product, it works. And oh, by the way, now that interest rates are going up and cost of money is going up, your desire to improve the operational efficiency of your business also went up. Um, you were in the oil and gas business. It's when the price of a barrel of oil goes up, it's in your best interest to figure out how to optimize your operations because that's just more money going out the door. Either you're directly paying for the fuel or somebody else is, and somebody else cares that you're reducing your fuel consumption, but everybody wants you to reduce your consumption. And then when the price of oil is low, it's still your opportunity to improve for when the oil price goes back up. So again, having a really good product that's working and operational and shows efficiency gains that can be met by having it on board with that kind of pressures in the economy right now, unfortunately for our customers, but fortunately for everybody, it's a good place for us to be. We can instantly give you ROI either from your decreasing fuel use, bettering your operational performance, your maintenance practices. Those are all bottom line, immediate fixes that we can bring to you. And then, like I said, once we get in there and can spend some time asking other questions, you'd be surprised at the random questions or random pain points that our system can actually help you with. Bring up a little short sea story here is we have geofencing with our equipment. So there's a number of customers who said, I wish I knew when this vessel went there and was going this speed. Well, that's something that our system automatically, we're talking about a very complex system. That's a very basic thing that it can tell you. So the ability to help customers say, hey, you're within this your range of a rig, you're beneath this line of latitude on a river. There's a lot of data a lot of reports that have come out of that are necessary, so we can help decrease that administrative burden while also getting all the other great benefits of using our system.
From my point of view, you've seen some, other companies kind of have to sell when I don't think they wanted to. My year-end discussion, talking to Evan, and he and I were speaking just about, will there be more consolidation, and does this kind of lend you guys or lend just the industry in general for more consolidation? And certainly it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of all plays out this year. But who knows, right? Last year we thought it was never going to end, and now it looks like this year maybe there's some, easing of interest rates. Although the Fed recently said that maybe not so quickly, but let's see what happens. They've been pretty good so far. I know some people will say that they've raised interest rates and they shouldn't have, but I think they've kind of managed it as well as you can, being at the 40,000 foot level. And let's see how that's going to play out this year and how it's going to impact our industry.
Agree. And not as an economist, but I mean, we haven't plummeted in where the interest rates grow. They're painful, and I hope they come down. Unfortunately, I talked to my parents, and I hear the mortgage rate they had when they bought their house, and it makes me puke in my mouth a little bit. So I can't really complain about what's happening here when we've gone from 3% to 6%, and they're
Yeah.
telling me their house was at 12%. Like, oh my God,
Oh, my
12%.
parents in 1982 was 17, 18%.
Yes.
Yeah, and
So so
I remember the day my parents refinanced and it was like 9%. They were over the moon. And then they refinanced at like 6. And I'm like, I don't want to say what, compared to what people have used to for so long. Again, not to minimize pain and there's a real thing, but I think from an overall point of view, if you're trying to manage that, we're impacted and hopefully things can ease off and continue to maritime can continue to be a good investment going
you
forward.
mentioned some consolidation at the end of the year. Yeah, I think there's a handful of surprises. I think we'll see a little bit more in the consolidation arena. Probably a lot of lessons learned to be seen from the recent one.
But I do think, the interesting thing for me in that realm is investors. I want to invest in maritime, but not understanding the roundy end from the pointy end and what gets done. And it sounds like, your investors have that kind of knowledge and understanding and background and have been educated in it, whether they came up in the industry or kind of just learned about it. But to me, it's exciting. It's new. It's still relatively untouched. I think there's a lot of money waiting on the sidelines to come in. But let's hopefully it'll be smarter and get involvement from people who've been in the industry. And I think that that's something that is always needed to different degrees, of course.
I think to that point, I think there's a lot of people in technology who say it's great tech, it'll transfer into someplace else. And oh, maritime's huge. So, hey, our two facts are maritime is huge and technology is good. And they really don't understand maritime. And we're a funky group. Well, we're pretty we're a smaller group when it comes to who knows who from maritime schools, in the United States to the maritime world in Asia and in Europe. It's not a humongous place. We're averse to technology. We're kind of tribal in a good and bad way. And so, yeah, you can come in and play. And again, not to speak out of turn, but you see some groups that have come in and it's a pure technology play, and Maritime's going to like it because it's good. Is not probably the preferred way to go in. It is, hey, this works because I've used it. I know how it touches the ship. I know the pointy end from the round end. It's nice to have a team and understand. Yeah, I've stood a watch and somebody else has been out to sea. That means a lot.
Yep.
You would think it wouldn't, but it does.
Again, whether standing a watch or negotiating with an ornery charter or owner, been there, or staying up late to operate a ship because, you have to make sure the BLs are signed or what have you. I mean, there's all, or dealing with an emergency on board and having to, God forbid, get off a sailor because they got hurt. I mean, that's all the things that happen in the industry that are, I think, kind of unique. Companies would be smart to kind of sprinkle that in. Again, I wouldn't start a technology company or any company with just maritime people, and because I think it's too much tribal and too much group think. I think it's good to have a balance, right? You want people from different areas, different experiences, different cultural backgrounds. You want to kind of have that, because I think if you have too much of a group think it gets a little bit out of control, which leads me into my next kind of question. It's something I love to ask guests to come on. So your background is on, Navy nuclear subs and then working for a shipping company. If you had somebody, whether it's a high school or college, is saying, hey, Will, it's interesting what you do, convince me. I have a couple of job offers. I have a couple of paths I could take. Why should I, get into the maritime space? What do you tell people why they should join this industry?
My dad had a job. He had a career, but I think of myself as having a career. I think I care about the maritime industry as much as I care about my specific career or job, if that makes sense. And I find more people in the maritime industry care as much about the industry as they care about anything else. It's not just a job; it is a career. Truth in advertising, you could, if you have the brains and the hard work, you might be able to make more money and have a cushier job somewhere else. You kind of want to be in a real industry. It's real. It's a big pieces of steel that go do real work that really help carry our economy. And you need to want to do that. You need to want to, kind of get your hands dirty and be a part of something real. And it's going to be around for a long, long time. That's another part that I tell people. As much as everything else evolves, we're not going to have flying ships. We're going to have ships. Ships are going
Yep.
to be transporting goods throughout my lifetime and my children's lifetime. And it's always going to be the most economic way to transport goods that I can see for many generations. There's a lot to be gained by introducing and making things better within maritime. So if you want to, use technology to make something real better, maritime's a great place to be in it. Um, I guess the crux of it too is I like the ocean. I love being near the lakes. I like, I like making sure that I have salt behind my ears. So, if you were raised on a boat or went sailing or canoeing or something and loved it, then try to go deep dive into it. See, join the maritime and see if it clicks.
I think that's really interesting. And I had Kyle Henderson on of Vision, who's on the container side, and he said, what's really interesting about this industry is if you make a 1% improvement in efficiency in the industry, it has hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of implication. Because in your case, if you make ships more efficient, that's and you have at some point hundreds or thousands of ships underneath using your product or similar. That's a
Within the
significant
landscape. Yeah.
that's a significant amount of actual money or environmental impact lessened or money saved or both. That's actually there, and that's something that's very, very difficult to get anywhere else from a 1% change.
The capital required to build these vessels is enormous. The capital required to repower is almost just as bad in these days. So you're talking about thousands of vessels that are never going to be repowered during their lifetime. So if you really want to, that journey to decarbonization is how do you improve all of the vessels that are out there right now without massive amounts of capital? Now we say, oh, let's repower. Well, think about the costs, the equipment, the wastage that goes into repowering something for potentially, whatever your percentage of efficiency gains. What if I was to give you those efficiency gains on the vessel you have right now? Shouldn't we try to do that for a fraction of the capital cost and a fraction and ROI on the operating expenses that come with a system like ours and systems that are within this community? I mean, you've had other guests recently that do similar things for optimization. But you're right. It's just tremendous amounts to be gained. We've seen, some customers, we've shown double digits in parts of their operation in fuel efficiency. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to take fuel costs over your year and decrease it by 10%. And that all goes to the bottom line. It's not like we're making your vessel operate more harshly while you're saving fuel. It's usually, running your equipment a little nicer, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you're getting that fuel savings, but plus you're also extending your life of your equipment.
You get into safety of cargo, safety of sailors. It's all kind of has a generally a positive outcome for everything overall. To me, I think just the fact that there are now so many different areas to dip your toe into maritime. Yes, the kind of the way that I went, you went, you go to sea and come out and you find your way. Now if you like, listen, I don't want to do that, but I want to be involved, there are so many ways, just like you said, whether it's emissions or reporting or all these other really cool software and other types of things, using AI, MI, and becoming an expert that way, which there were fewer career paths even just 10 years ago, and now there's significantly more, which is great because having a more diverse workforce is certainly, I think, better for everybody overall.
If we got a second right now on the diverse workforce, you know, yes, statistically, your company moves faster, better with a more diverse workforce. So it is inherently better to make sure that you have differing opinions and a differing group of people around you when you're trying to build. Even a standard large maritime company versus, even you'd say, oh, you can be diverse, Will, you're in a technology company. But I tell you, in any company I've worked at, diversity has led to quicker and better thinking. You mentioned it earlier, not having all mariners. Yes. Funny story. Some of our data analytics team come from cancer research, and you say, "Oh, that doesn't make any sense for maritime." Well, it's finding something that's anomalous or something cancerous within your vessel. That's what these people have expertise at. So they may not at the beginning have known exactly what they were looking at, but they could tell you something was wrong.
Yep.
And
That's all you need.
that was more important than anything else, because if you take, myself included, a bunch of marine engineers and put them in a room and stare at something, they're looking at their 30 years of experience, 20 years of experience, and potentially not at the data.
Like I think in anything, and you need to have the diversity of ideas and thoughts and backgrounds and having computer science people is okay. And then I'm, saying to the computer science only companies, it's okay to have some maritime people in there. We don't bite, at least not during the day. At night, that's another story. But as I wrap up, I love to ask this question, and it's one that I get some cool answers on, and I get answers including people are writing books or things like that. So what are you reading? I know as a CEO of a company, it's a little difficult because you have a lot of different duties, but maybe during travel or at night, I try to get a little more disciplined instead of doom scrolling to pick up a book at night, even just for 20 minutes. Anything that's tickling your fancy recently?
It's very timely, coming right after the Christmas holiday. So my wife gave me two books, which was great of her. A little backstory. I got down a rabbit hole of whitewater rafting. I wanted to be a better whitewater rafter, so I started really learning that trade a couple years ago. I'm actually a certified guide in Washington State for guiding on a river. And my daughter jokes that I went from driving nuclear subs to driving a six-person raft. I kind of have a very strange trajectory here. She doesn't know, I got to get down to a kayak, I guess, next. But to that point, my wife gave me a book. It's called The River You Touch. It's a memoir by a fishing guide, Chris Dombrowski, who spends time raft fly fishing. And I'd say it's beautiful. I mean, it's very melodic. I cannot write like that. My engineer brain doesn't work that way. So I have an appreciation for listening to how or reading how he describes the rivers he's on, and it gets me excited about getting on those rivers myself. And then the other funny one, well, not funny, is she gave me a book. It's called The Art of Gathering: How We Meet and Why It Matters by Priya Parker. And it's a book about how to do better meetings, but more the philosophy around that. And I guess some of my colleagues must have told her that I suck at meetings, so she wants to improve on that.
Yeah, that
But
sounds
what
good.
what I found though now in the post-COVID days is people have a lot less tolerance for bad meetings.
Yeah.
Like number one, coming out of COVID, we want to meet. We feel it's important to be physical and talk to people, but we have less tolerance for crappy meetings
Yep.
and wasting time. So I look for. I'm only just starting that one. I'll be honest. Over the holiday, I kind of tried to do the river book. It was more of a off business type book. But I look forward to the art of gathering to see what I can gain out of that.
That sounds pretty awesome. A colleague of mine read a book about meetings. I was searching my brain about it, and it talks about like making a better meeting. The title was a little, I forgot the name of it, and I'll put it in the notes there when I remember. But the title was something that was certainly it was misleading about meetings, but well, this one sounds pretty good as well. Well, thank you for coming on the pod. I appreciate it. I thought it was really interesting to talk about a little bit of the evolution of what you guys are doing, and just talk about this the industry as well, and kind of what's going on with your company and what you see for the next year and beyond. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris.